Amid Aleph, and we said kocheles, which is painting your eye, is asur mishum tzovas, like painting, and godeles upokeses, which was braiding your hair or putting rouge on your face, is mishum bone. Comes under the heading of binyan. Ask the Gemara v'chiderech binyan b'kach. What kind of binyan is that? We know what binyan is. What braiding your hair is binyan? More says in yes. Kiddush Rab Shimon ben Menashe. It says Vayiven Hashem Elokim esat selah. When Hashem took the rib from Adam, because it says Vayiven Hashem Elokim esat selah asher lakach min ha'adam li'isha. V'lameit shekila Kadosh Baruch Hu l'chava v'eviyeh etzel adam. Kadosh Baruch Hu braided Chava's hair and presented her to Adam. Shekain b'krachi hayam, in islands, korim lekalisa binyasa. They would say building up your braids. So the concept of binyan is connected to braid. Tanya Rab Shimon ben Elazar Omer. Goidelas koichelas upoikesas la'atzma ptura. If you braid your own hair or you put your own makeup on, you're potter. The reason the Gemara is going to say you're potter because you can't really do a very good job. It's almost like kila'achayad. You think about when our children got married and we hired those makeup artists. So a makeup artist puts makeup on another person, not on themselves. So the real way of doing it is by doing it to somebody else. So l'chaverta chayeves. Otherwise, it's not a real malacha. A woman should not put makeup on her face. Mitneishet sovas is considered painting on Shabbos, which is one of the avos malachos. Tan Rabbanon, hachoylev, if you milk a cow, v'hamachabetz, you sort of osakimin kli gemi, you sieve out the curds in the way of a milk. And then amagabe, that's you finally make the cheese where you cut out blocks. So the shear that would give you a chiyuv for these malachas is kegroigros. You have to make at least a fig's worth of either the milk or the curds and whey or the cheese. Amachabed, which is sweeping your floor. V'hamarabetz is like you poured water on the floor to get rid of the dust that's on the floor. V'haroy dechalos dvash, you go to a beehive and you remove the honeycombs filled with honey. So these are malachos. Shogeg b'Shabbos chayiv chatas. If you did it b'shogeg, you'd actually be chayiv chatas. L'chora, therefore, if you did it b'mezid, you would get skila. Or kores, if there was no asra. Hazy beyond if loikar boy, if you did these malachos on yontif, there's no skila, you get malchus. If you do forbidden work on yontif. But according to Rabbi Eliezer, these are deraisa dika malachos. The chachamim oimrim echad zeh ve'echad zeh eino el mishum shvus. These six, choyle, mechabetz, megabe, mechabet, v'marbetz, v'roide, according to the Chachamim, is only a shvus midrabanon. It's midrabanon. They're concerned that when you sweep or when you put water, on the dust, it'll fill up the holes in the floorboard, and that would be binyan. But maybe Dilma kikana slate. It doesn't automatically happen. So as a gzeira midrabanan to avoid coming to malacha bin. Rav Nachman bar Guria ikla nardo. Rav Nachman visited nardo. Boy minei. Choylev mishumayim mechayev. When you do the act of milking, what are you chayev for? Omelo mishum choylev. Not a very intrinsic answer. Mechabetz, if you sieve the milk to make the whey, so mishum mai mechayev, or mishum mechabetz. And megabein, if you make cheese, mishum mai mechayev, or mishum megabein. Armulei, I understand. Rabbi Katel Kani ba'agma, but where was your Rebbe pulling weeds out of a pond? I mean, what kind of Rebbe did you have? He didn't. I mean, you're not. We're asking you what av malach is mechabetz connected to, not mechabetz because mechabetz. So also Shol ben Midrash. He went to ask in yeshiva. Amrulei, choylav chay b'shum afarek. So, for example, when you take a wheat kernel and you separate the wheat kernel from the chaff, so the Gemara sees milking is similar. It's like dosh. Like you take the part that you want from the klipa that's around it. So milking is the similar melacha. Mechabetz, doing the sieving, is chay b'shum boirer. Like that's boirer. Separate. You want what's good, you take away the bad. Megabin chay b'shum boimer. And here making cheese is because you cut big blocks. So that's like a binyan. If you sweep or put water on the ground or remove the honeycomb, shoga b'shabes chayiv chatis. He's beyond of like arbon di Rabbi Yezer. The Shulchan Aruch learns that Redias Dvash is not chayiv chatis. We hold like the Chachamim against Rabbi Yezer, that there's ein b'kachi of chatas k'divrei Chacham. However, it's prohibited to milk your oiver mishum afarek. The only thing is, if the milk is causing tsar to the behema, you can get rid of the milk in a shinui way, or you can tell a goy to do it. Normally, amir la'akum is not permitted, but if it's tsar balei chaim, you're allowed to do it. I remember seeing that many times in kibbutz Malei Gilboa, where they had a big milking. They had 90 cows. This was in the 70s, late 70s, and when I visited, and they would do this was done on Shabbos as well because of this heter of tsar balei chaim. And making cheese is chayiv mishum boine. Is the way Shulchan Aruch passes. So, Rabbi Elazar, in explaining Rabbi Yezer's sheet, my time Rabbi Yezer, D'chsiv, why is Redias Dvash, why is it chayiv v'chatas? So he brings a pasuk from Shmuel Aleph. It refers to Yehona's son, took his stick, vayidbolota bayarot dvash, and he dipped it into the dvash. It's interesting that they called it yaros dvash. Yar is a forest. What does a forest have to do with dvash? If you're walking around in a forest and you pull out a tree or a bush that's in the ground, you're chayiv chatas. Av chalois dvash. Harodi ben b'Shabbos chayiv chatas. Our Meimar shor zilcha b'mechoiza. Our Meimar permitted this malacha of putting water on a dusty floor to get rid of the dust. Omar, he said, "Time of my Omer Rabbanon." Why did the Chachamim say you shouldn't do it? Remember, according to Rabbanon, doing mechabetz, not mechabetz, harbatza, hamarabetz, which is this water business, was only a gzeira, was a shvus. Dilma osila shvui gumos, because you're going to smooth out the holes in the floor by the moist dust. Ocha like a gumos. Here in Mechuzah, I guess it was a wealthier place. They didn't have holes in their floor, so they didn't have to worry. Or it was made out of stone, not wood, so there were no gumos. because it was made out of avonim. Rashi says, Ritzvah Savonim Haisa B'Cholayir. And there's no gumos there. Rava Tosfo Ashkechel Ravina de Komitztar Mehavlo. Rava Tosfo found that Ravina, he must have had a lot of allergies. Because the dust in the house gave him a lot of tsar. The Amrila, some people say it was Mark Shisha Brei de Rava. Ashkechel found Ravashi de Komitztar Mehavlo. That it was Ravashi who the dust bothered him. Lenny, I'm teaching the Daf Yomi. Can I call you back in about 30 minutes? Okay. Omer Leilo, Savar Lamar Lahadatanya. Don't you hold to the following Bryce Roitzla Rabbits, it's based on Shabbos. So let's say a person, what are you being Mitzayah? Didn't you hear the Baraisa that if you want to do this watering business, even if you had a wood floor, we're not talking about a mechuzah where there was a stone floor, but in a wood floor where there were gumos. You want it to be marbitz your floor, maybe arevam le'amayim. You bring a jug full of water. V'rochetz panav b'zavizu. You wash your face in this corner, and you go to the other corner, yada b'zavizu, and raglav b'zavizu. And as you wash your face, you're splashing water all over the place. So it's a dover shein miskave. Your kavan is to wash the face. You have some spilling water, then that was a way to do our butza, because like Reb Shimon learned, we learned dover shein miskavein is malach, is not a malach. V'nimsa bayis misrabitz me'elav. Omer lei. So lavadaita. You know what? I didn't think of that. It's a good eitzah. Tana, we learn in the Mishnah, Isha Chachama, a wise woman, Marbetz's base of B'Shabbos. She can be Marbitz directly. She doesn't have to do this. She can just dump the water on the floor. Why? Because Ayidna, the sphere like Reb Shimon, Sharf L'Chatchila. Since we hold of Reb Shimon, where, remember, the basic halacha of Reb Shimon is if I have a bench, and I drag a bench from one corner to another corner, and it makes a ditch in the ground. So I made a guma. I'm not chayiv for binyan, because my kavanah was not to make the guma. It was to drag the bench from here to there. As long as it's not a psik reisha, as long as it doesn't automatically have to happen, Reb Shimon permits. So here as well, my kavanah is not for binyan, is not to fill these gumos. It's to put water on this dust. It's not automatic that it's going to fill, so it permits it. The dover shem is kavin mutter, says Rashi. So we're not dealing with malacha shein tzrich legufa, because that's another. Sometimes we use Rab Shimon to pater us, but Rashi says very clearly here. It's because remember yesterday we learned about malacha shein tzrich legufa. That's not what's going on here. It's in the dover shein is kavin mode. Period. Mishnah. New sugya, a toilesh ma'otzitz nakuv. So we know you can have a flower pot that has a hole in it, and if it has a hole in it, it derives some of its nourishment from the ground. If you put the flower pot on the ground, and then you have a flower pot that doesn't have a hole in it, it's completely separated from the ground. So hatoilish me'otzitz nakuv chayiv. So you're not allowed to pluck or harvest on Shabbos. So if the otzitz is connected to the ground through the hole, then if I pluck a flower from the flower pot, I'm chayiv for tlisha. If the flower pot does not have a hole, and it's already been separated from the ground, it's in a flower pot, I'm potter. If I'm not chayiv for tlisha. I'm not allowed to do it, but it's potter of a losser. The Rab Shimon poiter bezovazeh. Rab Shimon has a unique opinion that even if the flower pot has a hole in it, and we would think that it's somehow connected to the ground, it's not enough of a connection were that if I'm toilish it from the flower pot, I'm going to be chayiv for tlisha. That's Rab Shimon. Rami le Abai le Rava. So Abai asked the following kasha. Rami le Rav Chia bar Rav le Rav. Some people say Rav Chia on Rav. It says in the Mishnah, Rab Shimon pointed bazov azeh. Rab Shimon pottered even by an otzitz noku, a flower pot that has a hole. Alma nokum Rab Shimon kishena noku. It seems like even though the flower pot has a hole in it, he treats it as like an independent flower pot without a hole in it. Briminu. I'll ask you a steerer from another Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon Oimer, ein bein noku l'sheinu noku. What's the halachic difference between a flower pot that's got a hole in it versus a flower pot that doesn't got a hole in it? So we know the concept that dry seeds or any kind of food, in order for it to be makabel tuma, it has to be hechshel makabel tuma. It has to be moistened with one of the 7 fluids: water, milk, dam, whatever the 7 fluids are. Now, something that's connected to the ground is not makabel tuma. Only food that's been already plucked from the ground can be makabel tuma. So here, Reb Shimon seems to say the only halachic distinction between a flower pot with a hole in it versus one with not a hole in it is that a flower pot with a hole in it, the food items in that flower pot cannot be machshel makabel tuma, because it's as if they're still planted in the ground. While a flower pot without a hole, which is separate from the ground, doesn't derive any nourishment from the ground, is considered like you've already harvested wheat, and if it gets moist, it's machshel makabel tuma. However, if it's true that a nokuv is kishe'en a nokuv, it seems to be a steer what we said before. Amr leila chol mili, Reb Shimon ketolush mashvilei. Really, Reb Shimon treats even a flower pot that has a hole in it as if it's not connected to the ground. The hole is not enough to make it any different. Shiny linyan tumya, regarding tuma, he makes a distinction. The hatoira ribs satara etzel zroy. There, the Torah, any kind of unika, any kind of nourishment, even through a hole, will say that something like that will remain tohar. Shenema al kol zera zeru asher yizareh. But by all other cases, Reb Shimon will hold that a flower pot with a hole in it is treated like even a flower pot without a hole. So boy ne'ahu sabim Rab Zera. One of the elders asked from Rab Zera, what if shoirish keneged nekev? Let's say you have a flower in the flower pot, and the root is right next to the hole. What does Rab Shimon say regarding that? Will Rab Shimon also agree that it's not considered like there's unika, that it's also considered tolush, or maybe there he'll be moided that it's tol, that it's considered as if there is unika. Ishtik v'lam he didn't answer him. Zim lechada, one time he was found learning. Umoide Rab Shimon she'im nikiv bichdei taras, that Rab Shimon will admit that a flower pot with a hole in it derives nourishment from the ground, and therefore you'd be chayiv for tlisha if it's got a hole in it enough to remove the status of it as a kli. Any kli, here, everything is a kli. Now, if the kli is damaged to the point where it cannot hold certain items, whether it's water, whether it's pomegranates, we're going to see there's different madregos. But once a kli becomes unusable because it can't hold things, so it's not makabel tum anymore. So Reb Shimon holds that a flower pot that has a defect in it large enough to make it tahor as a kli he'll agree that such a flower pot is connected to the ground, and if you pluck something from that flower pot on Shabbos, you'd be chayav for tlisha. But he was asked the question, not about a big hole like that. What about if you have root next to the hole? Is that like that? Omerlei, hashta shorsh keneged nekev boy minach. You asked me about if the root of a flower is directly neged, directly opposite that hole. And you didn't have an answer. Because if you have a flower pot, it's got a big hole in it, but the roots are somewhere else. So certainly we shouldn't have the answer for that. Why if you're so certain over here, what do you mean? Why weren't you certain over there? So Omer Abaya, the Yitmar Lad Rab Zera Achiyud Yitmar. So the correct statement of Rab Zera here is Umoide Rab Shimon. She'imnikav lamata meravias. That means if the kli is broken, where it cannot hold even a revius of fluid from below that hole, then it's not considered a kli. And it would be the same din by a flower pot that's missing that amount, in that if you would do tlisha of something growing in that flower pot, you'd be chayav for tlisha because it's enough of a defect in the flower pot to connect it to the ground. Now, we introduced this concept of kalim, which are normally makabel tuma, if a nevela falls on it or sheretz falls on it. But if the kli is damaged to a certain degree, it's metayar from tuma. Even, not only is it not makabel tuma, but if the kli was tameh, and it now gets damaged to these degrees, it now becomes tohar, and it's not tameh anymore. Amar Rava, chomesh midos bekli cheres. An earthenware kli, as opposed to, for example, a metal kli, we're talking about here an earthenware kli, has the following gedorim. Nikiv kamotzi mashke. Let's say it only has a hole in it, large enough that fluid, if it was in the kli, would leak out. But for example, you can have a hole in a kli that is small enough, which would allow fluid in that kli with hydrostatic pressure pushing down, forcing fluid out of there. But for example, if you put the kli in a sink of water, you would not have water coming into it. So a kli, the smallest version of a kli, the smallest version of a hole in a kli, is one that will allow water to flow out of the kli, but not to bring water in. So if it's got a hole, kimotzi mashke tor milatami gistra. It will not be even the. Let's say you take an earthenware kli and you break it into pieces. So the piece can also be used for certain things. Let's say you have a hole in your roof and it's raining. You could put that piece underneath the hole to collect water. However, therefore that kli has function, and therefore would still remain tameh if it was tameh. However, if that piece now has a hole, kimotzi mashke, it's also completely tor from being metame in that stance. So it's tor to metame gisra v'adayin kli hu lekadish b'mechatas. But you still could prepare for para aduma mechatas. You have to mix the ashes of para aduma with water. And such a kli, even though it has a hole in it, kimotzi mashke, it would still be tor to make that mechatas. Now, nikiv kikonis mashke, it could still become tameh regarding kiddush chatas. Now, nikiv kikonis mashke, let's say the hole's a little bit bigger, where that not only does it allow water to flow out of it, it allows water to come in if you put it in some standing water. So now it'll not be makabel tuma, such a kli, and therefore it's safe to use for mechatas. But v'adayin kli hu la'achshir bozroim. It would still be considered a kli because you could hold pumpkin seeds in it. And therefore, that kli could still be makabel tumah. Nikiv kishorsh cotton, if it's got a hole in it, the size like of a small root, so torah l'achshir bozroim. So now if it was makabel, if this kli was used to hold seeds, and now it has a hole the size of a shorsh cotton, and it had become tumah, it now becomes tohar. But if you're going to use that kli l'kabel bozesim, that kli would still be makabel tumah because it's large enough to hold olives. Nikiv kamotzi zesim. If the kli has a large enough hole that it cannot hold olives, so torah l'kabel bozesim. If that kli was used to hold zesim and it was a tumah dika kli, it now becomes tohar. But adayin kli l'kabel b'rimonim. If all of a sudden you decide you're going to use that kli that has a hole in it the size of an olive, but you're going to put pomegranates in it. So it's a righteous kli, it can hold pomegranates. It's not going to fall out, and therefore it would be makabel tumah. Nikiv kamotzi rimonim, that's the limit. Tor miklum. So now it's no longer a kli and it's completely torn no matter what. Except im hukav tzamid pasil, if it's got a top which seals completely, so ad sheyifchas rubo. So you got to destroy more than 51% of the kli in order, for example, if you put such a kli, the ola mace, the tumah will not, if it's sealed from the top by a lid, a tumah will not go in whole unless it's a majority, 51%. And otherwise, it would protect items in that kli. If you put it into a room where there was a corpse, it would protect everything in that kli from makabel tumas mace, unless it was yifchas rubo. Unless 51% of the kli, it was, it had a hole in it bigger than 51%. Amravasi shamati kli cheres shiuro kamotzi rimon. He heard a basic statement that a kli cheres, its shear to remain a kli is kamotzi rimon. That means once you have the size of a hole in a kli, the size to remove a pomegranate, it's not a kli anymore. Yeah, but you forgot about the concept of a kli cheres that has a top to it that seals it. And Rava was one who said you need 51%. It's a big kli, that's kamotzi rimon, and smaller klis, you can't even fit a rimon in, then you would have to use the shear of 51%. Okay, we'll stop here. Mirz Hashem will finish the parak tomorrow and start the new parak HaZoyrek.